My mother was a complete and utter sadist. She loved nobody on earth. There was nobody she loved. I don't know if she loved herself or just adored what she had created of herself, which was this beautiful prostitute. She was not what they call footpath dolly. She did not go out and sell on the footpath. She was a prostitute. Kate Leigh, I'm sure you've all heard of her, and Tilly Devine. I knew of them only as Kate and Tilly. I did not know their surnames. I was too young and never spoken to. Words were never spoken to me, only commands. I was taught to obey under any condition. Even a smile, I was taught when to smile and how to smile. I was taught to urinate only on command. I was taught to do what I was told to do, and I did it. I did it obediently, and first out of fear, because there is great fear in a family like that. The punishments are brutal. At one stage, I suffered a broken neck. I was paralysed for a year at the Royal Children's Hospital in Sydney. Many injuries were sustained because this was their way. They were both sadists, my mother and my father. There was no such thing as this wonderful mother love or father love. My mother would take me every day down to Mark Foy's, which now has the courthouse underneath, which every time I see it on there, I know more about that place than they do. And you'd go up these lovely cement steps to this beautiful veranda, and she'd sit there. I don't know whether she was waiting for a client to go past, because you had to walk past Mark Foy's to go up the hill to come to Sherbrooke Lane. You had to go up there to go Palmer Street, which was very infamously famous. So I don't remember that, whether she was waiting for a client to go back or whether it was just because she was a lady. And she looked like all the other ladies there, the hats, the gloves, the bit, and the little girl. So then we would go up the hill and go into Palmer Street. And around the corner there was this house, and they had what is now, I know now as being a madam. I didn't know then that that was a madam. I didn't even know it was called a brothel. I went there because that's where my mother took me. I was sitting in the front room of this house, had a big old lounge with a big old arm on it, and I sat on the arm of this chair, and there was a lady over there at a table, and she was eating fish and chips. I do remember it because I was always hungry. And she was eating fish and chips, and she had the brightest red hair I have ever seen in my life, and she was wearing, I think they're called kimonos or like that. She wasn't Asian. She was definitely an Australian lady in this kimono. She was sitting there at the end of the table eating these fish and chips. And my mother was in the other room. And the next minute, there was a knock at the door, which led onto the street. Brothels were mostly very convenient places. And in walked the most beautiful young woman I have ever seen. And I know her name was Liz because I heard the madam, we'll say, "What are you doing here, Liz?" And then she said something about Vi, which was my mother's name. And I'm sitting on this chair looking at this beautiful, she was, to this day, at 83, she inspired me, so beautiful. In fact, a little like my mother was beautiful. So she's standing there, and the redhead's saying to her, "You shouldn't have come, you shouldn't have come." So she said, "No, I have to see her or something." So the next minute, out of the other room came my mother. My mother, stark naked, which was a shock to me there in this room. Because mostly if you're going to see anybody, you put something on. But she came out. And I looked straight to her hand. My father had made a special cover, a razor, if any of the men here know of it, a cutthroat razor, flipped open. And it's a fairly long thing, you know. And my mother had tiny hands. And my father had made a cork cover so that my mother could hold this and conceal it. So if you saw her hand, it was like that. And she just walked up to this very beautiful young woman and ripped her face open from the eye there and there, which was apparently, I know later, traditional way that razors must be used so that your victim doesn't die. And it's a certain way, the cut is there and across so that it opens up, which I knew then later, that if you kill somebody, you went to jail. So nobody wanted to go to jail for their enemy. So you made it so that your enemy looked in a mirror every day and remembered you and what they did. So whatever she did, I don't know, but I remember this. And I remember the shock because I didn't like blood. I was especially against it. Most of the time I'd seen my own. So I didn't like it. And this blood went everywhere. It was just everywhere. And it went over Madam's fish and chips. And Madam got upset. This woman is gurgling, screaming, bleeding to death. I'm sitting on the... And a blood spot had went on my white socks. Another part of the story. But okay, Madam's gone berserk because her fish and chips were ruined. There was blood on them. My mother calmly turned around and went back in there like, okay, business as usual, you know, away we go. There was blood everywhere. This woman is screaming and the redhead saying to her, get out now before they come, which I assume would have been the police, because she was screaming and bleeding copious amounts of gallons of blood. I think it was gallons, I'm sure it was. So away she went. Redhead cleans up the blood, swapping down, getting buckets, doing things. I'm still sitting there and looking at it, fascinated by a spot of blood on my sock. So if I do turn out to be a little bit off colour, ladies and gentlemen, please forgive me. This spot of blood, a few minutes later, out comes Mum, looking beautiful. Nothing had happened. She gets me by the hand, doesn't say a word to the redhead, and out the door. So, of course, when I get out the door, I'm a little girl. I'm looking for the lady. She had to be there in blood. But she wasn't. There was people and cars. And I don't even think I saw a spot of blood, but I looked up the street. My mother's dragging me the other way towards the main street, because what I didn't realise was you get out of there quick. And to this day, I would like to know, but I don't know what happened to Liz. Did she bleed to death? Did she go to hospital? Did she live? Did she ever get married? Was she ugly? Did she have children? Are there any children out there that I can look at and say, God forgive my mother? Because that stayed in my mind. Though I have seen death in horrible forms, that was the most horrifying. So we walked down Oxford Street, I think it's called, got on the train, and we're going home. Not a word as she said to me, and I'm swinging my feet, and I'm looking at this bit of blood. And she looked down, and it's always a packed train, two sitting in front of you, two here, two there, you know, the old trains and dirty smelling. And she just looked down and calmly said, oh, has your nose been bleeding again, dear? And pulled the sock up. Clever, always thinking. So to me that was a very memorable and a very horrific occasion of horror that I saw, and have often thought about because of Liz, but it was also not the worst thing that's ever happened to me. There was much more,